Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Liana. Today is finally the day I have everything put together for a giant wear test and review video on both Cover FX liquid foundations. I'm reviewing and doing 2 wear tests on both. So let's just get right into this, okay? I'm going to talk about some information on both foundations and then we'll get into all 4 wear tests and then I'll just wrap things up at the end. So both of these foundations come in 40 shades, which is excellent. That's the type of shade range we expect to have nowadays. I have both of these foundations in N0, which is the lightest shade overall, and it's also the lightest neutral shade. They have their shade range split into different categories. So N is for neutral, P is for pink, G is for golden, and then they have G+, which is more of an olive undertone. Now, the Natural Finish Oil-Free Foundation is a medium coverage foundation for sensitive, normal, and dry skin types. It's more of a natural finish, and it's a water-based liquid foundation that imparts a radiant finish to the skin. It's available in 40 global shades, and this oil-free foundation has a silky, hydrating feel that glides on the skin and imparts a radiant second skin finish. It contains vitamins C and E to protect against free radicals, and it has a lightweight texture that is formulated to leave a luminous, soft, focused finish to the skin that's buildable for medium to full coverage. It's paraben-free, fragrance-free, free of gluten, mineral oil, talc, cruelty-free, and vegan, clinically tested. And then we have the Cover FX Power Play Foundation, which is a full coverage foundation for combination and oily skin types with a matte finish. Although it says it's a modern matte blurring foundation with weightless full coverage that provides sweat-proof, all-day wear, long-lasting shine control with environmental protection and a finish that will not oxidize. It too is free of parabens, sulfates, phthalates, fragrance, mineral oil, talc, and gluten. It's also vegan and cruelty-free. Cover FX is known to be more of a clean beauty brand, as it was developed more by dermatologists for people who have actual skin conditions. When they were first starting out, they were going to hospitals and testing out their brands on people who had like burns, really bad scars, to make sure that it was suitable for people with conditions like that, with really sensitive skin issues too, before putting it onto a more global market. When you know that they have a background like that, you can understand why it's like clinically tested and has fewer bad ingredients for you. It's got more skincare ingredients in there for you, so yeah. And you may be interested to know, not a lot of people know this, Cover FX is actually a Canadian brand, so. Let's get into the wear tests, and then I will tell you what I think of both of these.
I'm going to start by applying the Cover FX Natural Finish Oil-Free Foundation in N0, and we're going to start without primer on either side of the face, and so I'll just be dotting that on and then blending it in with a sponge on one side. This is a damp Real Techniques sponge, just in case you were wondering. And this formula is quite similar to the Eden Minerals Norskin, if you'll recall me reviewing that. It is kind of slick and dewy, although I would say that this is more of a light to medium coverage instead of a sheer to light. With that being said, just like the Norskin, I believe that this is better suited to drier skin types instead of combo oily skin types, because it does move around easily because of its slickness. And there you can see that one half of my face is done, and I would classify that as a light coverage because you can tell that it still looks very much like my face. And this is my Real Techniques Expert Face Brush, and I don't really see a difference in the way that this blends out with the sponge or a brush. I think you might get slightly higher coverage with the brush, but in terms of it being a natural finish, they both look natural. And they each blend out just as easily. This is what it looks like with the whole face done, and I'm just going to do my under eyes really quickly. I find doing my under eyes can be a helpful way for both me and for you to see whether or not my foundation is matching me in terms of undertone or shade depth, because if my skin tone concealer, Kat Von D concealer, looks lighter than normal, then chances are then the shade is a little bit off in some way or another. It doesn't look too bad here. There may be a slight difference, but overall I think that this foundation looks to be a pretty good match. I'm taking this deluxe size of the Kat Von D translucent powder and I'm setting under my eyes, which is something I always do regardless of whether or not I'm doing a foundation review. And now I'll zoom you in. So this was the side that I had blended with the sponge, and I think that this looks absolutely flawless. Honestly, it looks just like skin. And this is the side that I had blended with the brush, and there's not really a huge difference. It just looks really nice. Now for a change of pace, I'm going to set one side of my face so we can see whether or not there's a difference between setting and not setting. I'm looking right at you! No, I'm not. But I am checking to make sure that I have thoroughly set that side of my face. You'd honestly be surprised. This foundation is very, very slick to the touch, so it took a lot of powder. And I'm honestly still not sure I completely set it. I decided that was good enough, and then I kind of just held up my hand so you could see that was a good color match, and zoomed back in so you could see what my face looked like after I had set it. I don't know if you can tell, but I do think it definitely looks more matte on this side than what it did before, which is not a bad thing. You can still see some radiance, but we'll see how it holds up. Yes, I look a little crazy. It's for a very different look that you'll be seeing on my channel, or you will have already seen it probably. Anyway, here is the face now, 9 hours later. Even after I zoom you in, I have to say, it looks about the same. I don't really notice anything abnormal about this foundation. It's not kicking up anywhere on either side, the side I set or the side I didn't set. The only difference between the two sides is that the side that I set had less transfer, and it looks just a tiny bit more matte. That's the only difference. Nothing looks dry, including with the powder on top. That looks fine. This foundation looks awesome. I have zero complaints. Hi, so remember how I said I had zero complaints? Looking back on this, I realized it's not quite true. This foundation did oxidize just a little bit as I was going through some still photos I took. And so I'm just going to insert that now, and just so you can have a look, this looks just slightly peachy here, as you can see. So that's just a minor complaint, and that's all. I should also point out that nothing has emphasized any lines on my forehead or around my mouth, and nothing is creased. So yeah, it looks great. And that's it for wear test number 1. Next up will be wear test number 2. I'm starting with the Nude by Nature Perfecting Primer, which I received a deluxe sample from Chick Advisor. This is a silicone-free primer to go with a silicone-free foundation. So, in theory, they should work well together, right? Right? And I'm going to be taking the Cover FX Natural Finish Oil-Free Foundation in N0 again, and trying to blend it on top of the primer. Keyword, trying. I just really struggled for some reason, and I've worn this primer before, but it was sticking to the primer so badly that I had trouble blending it out, and when I went over certain areas again, it would start to lift up the product. I was having a really hard time blending this area in particular, and this is when I was just like starting to get kind of fed up. And here's my cheek, and I was trying to come in closer to see if you could see any of the weird texture going on, which you probably couldn't, but it was very frustrating, and you will be able to see the product lift away here because my cheek is getting redder. That's the product coming off instead of blending back in. Now, to be clear, the issue of it having trouble blending, that was not the only problem I had with it having a primer underneath. It also looked much heavier, much cakier, and basically looked like I was wearing a very textured foundation. And this won't be visible until later during the check-in, but I will post a couple of up-close photos I took as well. One area where the product just really didn't want to sit was on my nose. You'll see in the photos that I'll post that my nose just looked red on both sides as though I hadn't put any foundation there, which is very odd. Zooming in, and this is the sponge side of my makeup. I ended up going back over my cheek with the brush to get that one spot blended in. And right here, it doesn't look that bad, but trust me, later you'll see some stuff. And this is the brush side, which, focus! It will focus in a second. Sorry about that. My camera doesn't like my face. Here we go. You can kind of see what I'm talking about with my nose there, how it still looks red, but cakey at the same time, which is not a good combination. The face of satisfaction. I'm just going to do my under eye makeup and I'll be back. I did everything the same way as before, and instead of setting the right side of my face, I'm deciding to try and set the left side, you know, just to give each side of my face some equal attention. And we will just kind of see what happens. And of course, I just thought I'd show you what the left side of my face looks like with the powder on top. It does look a little bit more matte once again. And, you know, we'll see. So before we do the check-in, I thought I would show you some photos. My skin looks really caked up and heavy and kind of oily looking here. And here are a few photos of my upper lip where it looks kind of, I don't know, scaly or patchy or something that I'm not quite sure how to describe, but it definitely has some strange sort of texture going on there, which does happen with a few foundations I've tried, but this one it didn't before the primer. Here's the nose where it looks like I didn't even apply foundation because it's very red, and that's all I could really get a photo of. Now for the actual check-in, here is my face from a distance looking pretty good. It's when you get up close that it starts to fall apart. So immediately I think you can see that around my mouth looks a little bit crusty and some of my lines are a little bit accentuated. Going up into my cheeks look kind of textured in a sort of weird way. They look, I don't know if they're dry or what. I don't have dry skin right now, so that's a little odd. Up into this area looks the best that it can look anywhere on my face right now. My forehead in between my eyebrows looks a little weird, and my upper forehead looks kind of oily. And that's the way things are looking. Also, my nose has completely wiped away. Except for the very side there where it looks kind of crusty, but yeah, my nose, because I was blowing it, there's no foundation left, even on the side that I set it. So just for fun, I decided to run a tissue along my face to see how much transfer there was because I had primed and set that side of my face, and there was a lot. Possibly even more than the side that I did not set, and I wasn't running it that hard. So just be mindful that there's a lot of transfer with this. I do like this foundation, just not with primer, or at least not this primer. So I guess we'll move on to the next wear test. For wear test number 3, we're starting with the Cover FX Power Play Foundation in N0. And I'm just starting by dotting that on the right side of my face and then blending it out with a damp beauty sponge. This is Real Technique sponge. This is definitely a very pale neutral shade. I think this shade matches me very well. I actually think that it matches me better than the Natural Finish foundation in terms of shade depth and undertone, just because I feel like if the Natural Finish were a higher coverage foundation, it would look a little bit off. This one definitely blends in very well. The only thing I will say is that I have to go over certain spots a few more times in order to blend it in perfectly, whereas I don't have that trouble with the Natural Finish foundation. I think this is just because this is a higher coverage matte foundation. It's matte, but it's not overly dry. I just find that it does have a little bit of a harder time blending in certain spots. Now I'm just dotting on the left side of my face and I'm blending it in with the Real Techniques Expert Face Brush. And I'll tell you right now that I definitely prefer this foundation with a sponge over a brush. I just feel like the foundation looks a little bit more dry and textured with the brush as opposed to the sponge, which just makes it look a little bit more natural. And then my baby hairs got in my face again and again. See, even though it was technically already blended, I felt like I was just wanting to go over everything and make sure that it wasn't streaky or anything, because I could see brush strokes and I just didn't like it. I added a little bit more foundation on my right under eye because I noticed that I had a bit more on the left than I did on the right, and I blended that in with the sponge because that was the sponge side. Close-up time. This is the sponge side, and you can see that big breakout on my cheek there. Well, it's big for me, probably not for some of you. It's still not completely covered. There's still some purpley red showing through. The rest of my face is really well covered though, and the sponge side looks definitely more natural than the brush side, in my opinion. You may not be able to see it on camera here, but both sides still look pretty good. They're not flat matte. Neither side looks flat matte. You can still see a little bit of radiance, which is nice. I think this looks pretty good overall. Now that I've zoomed back out, I'm going to do my concealer routine like I did once before for you guys in the other foundation wear tests for the Natural Finish foundation, just so you can get an idea of what the color looks like with my concealer. And so this is the No Dark Shadows from No Cosmetics color corrector, and then I'm going on top of that with my usual Kat Von D Lock-It concealer in L1, and the color doesn't look any different than normal. It still looks basically the same as my skin tone, which is what I want, and it looks good. Like always, I'm setting both under eyes and eyelids with the Kat Von D Lock-It setting powder, and I'm going to set one side of my face, that's the right side, your left, and just see how these sides differ, with one side being set and one side being not set. In full disclosure, I set my neck, both sides, just because I'm wearing a white shirt. I just kind of wanted to be on the safe side. I could tell that this foundation didn't need nearly as much powder as the previous one because it's not as dewy. So this is what it looks like zoomed in, and is it just me, or do my pimples look a little bit more noticeable than prior to putting on powder? I feel like I'm taking crazy pills, but yeah, this is what it's looking like. And that's about it, so I guess I will see you at the end of the day check-in. And this is what my face looks like 8 hours later. Close up, this is the sponge side of the face. It's still held up very well, I think. Maybe not as well as the other foundation. I think it looks a little bit drier by the end of the day. And I was out in the heat for quite a while today, but it didn't melt, really. It did crease a little bit at the side. I don't think you can see it, though. That's why I was showing you my nose. Forehead looks fine, cheeks look fine. I noticed that unfortunately I have another zit on my cheek that wasn't there before. Once you zoom in, there you can see it, but I don't think it's the foundation, unfortunately. I think it's a hormonal thing. So I'm just going to have to get through this phase and hopefully my skin will calm down. It's either that or it's a new toner that I'm trying. I hope it's not that, though. Hopefully it's just hormonal. And now we're on to the brush side of the face, which I think looked a little bit worse for wear, and I didn't like it as much from the start anyway, so that's really no surprise to me. I just found that it looked a little bit more heavy, and I think the humidity had a little bit more of a toll on this side of my face. Maybe because I didn't set it with powder. It could be that. But overall, it still doesn't look too bad. I'm just zooming you in so you can see up close. I didn't really like the crease in my chin, like right below my lip. It looked a little bit caked up in there. And on my nose, it looked a little bit dry. But those were the really the only two problem areas. in my opinion. The rest of the face looked pretty good. And that's it for the check-in. So the next wear test will be the last one. It will be this foundation over a silicone primer. So I will see you for wear test number 4. I'm starting by applying the Wet n Wild Photo Focus Face Primer, which is a silicone primer to go with the silicone foundation. And then going back in with the Cover FX Power Play Foundation in N0, dotting that on the right side of my face and blending in with the Real Technique sponge. And just like I had trouble blending the other foundation over a primer, I think you can tell I have trouble blending this one over a primer as well. And I've used this primer so often with so many different foundations, and I've never had this problem. So it's a little puzzling. You can see how some of the dots just kind of sit there sticking down onto the primer, and I have to go over them several times. It did take a while to blend this out, especially with the sponge, and I did eventually get there, and the finish was still pretty decent. It just took a lot longer. Just for kicks, I timed it, and you'll see the results up on screen. There's obviously a pretty big difference there. And now I'm just dotting it on the left side of my face, and I'll be blending it out with the brush. The brush definitely went better than the sponge, as it did before when using primer. Just something about it doesn't stick down as much, and it's easier to blend out. But the thing is, I don't like the way it looks with the brush, not at all. There's quite a bit of, I don't know, not necessarily cakiness, it just looks quite rough around my mouth and my nose, which you'll see at the end of the day check-in. Time-wise, there wasn't nearly as much of a difference on the brush side. Just like last time, I'm adding a little bit more on my right under eye and using the sponge because I just found that there wasn't as much on that side. And then it's time to zoom in, and so this is the sponge side, and even though I had quite a bit of trouble blending, the actual finish still looks about the same as it did without primer, which is to say that it looks pretty darn good, at this point in time anyway. And over here on the brush side, you probably can't even tell, it looks nice here, but I felt that this side looked quite a bit more dry, especially on the nose area, and I felt like my hairs on the face were more emphasized. Zooming back out, I am doing my under eyes the exact same as before. Here I was like, oh my gosh, did I actually zoom back out the same way? And I'm like, yeah, I did. What am I doing? I'm setting the left side of my face, your right, instead of the right side, because I've already done that, and I'm just trying to give both sides equal treatment here. And then I'll zoom you back in so you can see what it looks like. This is already a pretty matte foundation that sets down pretty quickly, so I don't notice too much of a difference here, but let me know if you do. I think it looks pretty much the same as it did before. And this is what both sides of the face are looking like as of now, and I'll see you for this final wear test, final check-in. If I look rough, believe me, I was feeling rough here, so don't mind the way I look. So I'm just going to zoom in and have a look at the face here. Unfortunately, it wouldn't focus for the first little bit. That's unfortunate, but I am going to point at the areas that I felt looked a little bit off. So there was a patch here near my mouth, and there was a really rough patch at the side of my nose, which you can just barely see because it wouldn't focus, but it was just like a clump of textured foundation that was just sitting weird. There, it focused finally. Now you're gonna see all the wonderful texture. The forehead wasn't too bad. Oh my gosh, my under eyes look horrible right now. I'm so tired. This side of the nose was okay. The cheeks were looking just a tiny bit dry and kind of bumpy. Again, around my mouth, I was a little bit unhappy on that side. The center of the nose was horrible. I wasn't happy with that. It looked flaky and scaly and weird. That area that I'm pointing to there had kind of picked up on itself in a weird way. And yeah, this is what it looks like. And I'm just going to grab a tissue and show you what it looks like in terms of transfer. So that's the side that I set. Wasn't really anything there. And the side that I didn't set, again, nothing really there. So not bad, not bad. And that's the final wear test.
So now that you've seen both of the wear tests, you probably know what I'm thinking. I like both of these foundations, but without primer. I have a little bit of trouble with both of these when it comes to blending them over primer. Now, granted, it could just be the primers I'm using, but you should be able to blend them over your normal primers, right? You shouldn't have to go out and buy an extra special primer that's $40 just to get it to work. It should either work all the time, no matter what primer you're using, or chances are it's just not meant to be put over primer. That's the way I feel about it. I don't want to have to jump through hoops, try 10 different primers to get it to work. So yeah, I like both of these foundations. They do have definitely different finishes. I'm wearing the not natural, I'm wearing the Power Play foundation today over my Wet n Wild Photo Focus primer. This is the last wear test I'm doing. And yeah, they just don't sit well over primer, so I would prefer to just wear both of these on their own. I will say that they are slightly different colors from each other, though both still wearable for me. I do think that the natural finish oxidizes just slightly throughout the day, because I noticed when I first put it on, it looks like it pretty well matches, and then a couple hours later I looked at myself and I went, wait a second, I don't remember looking like this. I don't remember looking this dark. So there's that, and this one doesn't oxidize from my experience, and I was out in the humidity where I feel like it would have a better chance of oxidizing. So I'm not going to do swatches on my arm. The reason for that is I took a photo of neck swatches the other day that happened to include these two foundations. So I'm just going to throw that up on the screen, and I'll tell you from right to left, right being from my ear towards the center of my neck. I had the Bisutang BB cream. Then I had the Eden Minerals Nordic Veil in Urine. And I had the Eden Norskin in Urine. And I had the Cover FX Natural Finish in N0. The Cover FX Power Play in N0. And the Kat Von D Locket in Light 41. And I feel like all of these foundations blended into my neck after blending them out. There's a second shot there where I blended them out. And yeah, that's it. I'm sorry this video was so long, but I really wanted to go into detail, so better to have more detail than less, in my opinion. Of course, if you have any other questions, let me know down below. And if you try these foundations, let me know what you think. I post Mondays and Fridays here on this channel, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye, guys!